Trump has warned Israel that we will abandon you if the war continues. This is after Netanyahu launched Operation Gideon's Chariots, in which Netanyahu has declared that he will seize control over all of the Gaza Strip. The final big push, taking and keeping territory. And it's been 2.5 months since they've had any food, too. This is Trump's amazing, strong response.
3 great leaders that I saw 2 nights ago said to me, please help the people, the Palestinians. So I've already started working on that. And one way or the other, I'll get it solved. It's either going to be done nicely or it's going to be done violently. And I 99.9% want to do it nicely if we can.
In the history of Israel, never has an American president turned away from their leader and excluded them from Middle Eastern policy. And now also made a threat like that? I never thought I'd see the day. And along with pressure from other U.S. allies, it has worked. Netanyahu says he will allow aid to go through to preserve U.S. support. First time I've ever seen Israel bend to America like that. But is it for real? And will Netanyahu actually do it? Or will his ego not allow him? Let's see if it actually happens.
2 Israeli ambassadors were shot and killed in the United States this week. There is no possible way for me to even talk about this without smiling. Give me a second. 2 Israeli ambassadors were killed. Parnas is reporting on the 2 embassy workers from Israel who got shot as if they were just 2 random Jewish people that were enjoying a night out when they were killed. And that's just not what happened. The reason that they were targeted was because they are here in the United States working towards building relationships between Israel and America. Israel right now is murdering people en masse, and they've been doing it since October of 2023. To make it seem like Judaism and Zionism is the same thing is irresponsible, but it also is the clearest sign that that person is opposition in sheep's clothing. It is very clear that he wants you, along with the people that employ him, to think that Judaism is under attack. We fuck with the yarmulke, we fuck with Hanukkah, we don't fuck with the mass murder of children, men, and women who are sleeping in tents or taking refuge in schools or hiding out in hospitals or getting medical attention in hospitals. We also don't fuck with the starving of a population who is being punished for existing on a land that was theirs all the way up until people showed up from New York and other places and said, this is mine now. It is fucking insane and irresponsible that he makes it out to be an attack on Judaism, but that's what they want, and that is what they're going to continue to push. But you need to know, and you need to spread that word, that that's not what's happening, and that's not what happened.
The killer in the eyes and said, can I get you water? He said, yes, that would be great. And I walked to get it to him, and I literally handed it off. Unbeknownst to me, moments ago, this man had execution style killed 2 people, not one shot, we're talking multiple gunshots. And I looked evil right in the eye, and there he was. And seconds after I handed him the water, he brandishes the keffiyeh, yells Free Palestine, and then he's apprehended, and that's how it all unfolded.
Well, that's the woman who organized last night's event. Last hour, she was on the air telling us how she came face to face with the man who police say killed 2 Israeli embassy staffers in
The Washington, D.C. vigilante who is all over the news right now. His name is Elias Rodriguez, and he did not choose his targets randomly. This is who they were. Yaron Lischinski. He's a research assistant who worked at the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. His job was to research and influence American politicians to work for the benefit of Blue State. That's a foreign agent. Sarah Milgram. She organized people to go visit Israel for sympathy and empathy peddling. She also worked as a Blue State influencer to try to teach people to be sympathetic towards the Blue State too. Both of these people were working to influence American politicians and the public for for sympathies towards Blue State and are considered foreign agents and by definition no different than spies.
We have some really terrible news right now. Overnight, 2 Israeli staff members were shot outside of the Capitol Jewish Museum because they were Jewish in a blatant act of anti-Semitism. According to the Washington, D.C. police chief, she said the suspect chanted, quote, "Free, free Palestine," and proceeded to shoot this young Jewish couple. The 2 victims' names are Yaron Lishchinsky and Sarah Milgram. The 2 were attending a Young Diplomats event at the Capitol Museum. This is an attack that has been condemned by folks across the political spectrum. Donald Trump said that these killings have no place in America. AOC said that absolutely nothing justifies the murder of innocents, that she is devastated of the murder of the 2 people outside of the AJC event in Washington, D.C. And you have Democrats, Republicans, independents across the aisle condemning this horrific attack. We have some really terrible news right now. Overnight, 2 Israeli staff members were shot outside of the Capitol Jewish Museum because they were Jewish in a blatant act of anti-Semitism. According to the Washington, D.C. police chief, she said the suspect chanted, quote, "Free, free Palestine," and proceeded to shoot this young Jewish couple.
It is deeply irresponsible to frame this as a targeted attack just because they were Jewish, when by your own admission, they were Israeli embassy staff. One of them wasn't even Jewish, she was Christian. This was not about their religion, it was about their affiliation with a government that's currently being investigated for genocide and war crimes. That doesn't justify the violence, but it does change the context. Intentionally omitting that distinction isn't just dishonest, it's dangerous. Just say you're defending a state, not a faith. It's like claiming Brian Thompson was targeted in New York because he's a white man, when in reality it's because he's the CEO of a health insurance company that's profiting off a broken system. Misrepresenting a motive to push a narrative helps no one.
Aaron Parnas is a Zionist. Y'all are retweeting and fucking praising a Zionist. You wouldn't praise Nazis.
What we're seeing right now from Hamas and Palestinian Jihad is not fighting back against colonialism. These are terrorist attacks by definition. Women and children have been captured, raped, and killed. Hamas terrorists are currently going door to door in kibbutzes in southern Israel looking for Israeli citizens to target. Over 100 citizens have now been killed, over 1,000 have been injured. Dozens of Israelis have been taken back to Gaza where they have been paraded through the streets. This is an intentional slaughter of civilians merely because you don't agree with their government. Set aside all political factors. What's happening right now is an unprovoked terrorist attack. Innocent lives are lost, and the result of which is going to be a major war in the Middle East, one that these terrorists will not win.
Hell no. Hey, fuck no. Fuck no.
I spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu last night. I was with Ambassador Leiter, and Prime Minister Netanyahu called while I was with him. I spoke to him, and of course he was devastated. He was devastated, and it broke my heart to talk to Bibi last night. He was devastated, and I assured him we were looking into this. Of course, all of our investigators were working together, and I also spoke to President Trump multiple times, who was just heartbroken and devastated by this. And, you know, his first directive to us was make America safe again, and that's what we are going to do. There is no place for this hate in our country and in our world.
Have you ever translated a tweet from Hebrew to English? It's like finding the missing pages of Mein Kampf. The things that Israelis say about people in their language, frankly disgusting. Why do I bring this up? That one dude who got his brains blown out in DC, before you shed any tears, read some of the things he said. Also, the shooter was a Fed, don't believe the news.
Let's take a minute to talk about narratives, shall we? Particularly regarding the killing deaths of 2 Israeli diplomats in Washington, D.C. This was a headline that was tweeted today. Slain Israeli diplomats in D.C. remembered as voices for peace, according to Reuters. One of the victims, Yaron Lishchinsky, is actually a Christian Zionist from Germany who served in the IOF. According to the Israeli ambassador to Germany, Ron Prosser, he said that Leszczynski was born in Nuremberg and that he was, quote, a Christian, a true lover of Israel, served in the IDF, and chose to dedicate his life to the State of Israel and the Zionist cause. So Leszczynski served in the IOF, the same military that imposes an apartheid regime in Palestine, and that's been committing a genocide against Palestinians. And this is a tweet from Leszczynski himself on April 1st, saying, contrary to the bogus claims of the UN, there is enough food in Gaza for a long period of time, if Hamas lets civilians have it. No, Leszczynski was not a voice for peace. He was a voice for genocide and apartheid.
The President is very firm in his statement, expressing condolence and condemning violence. Asked me to convey that message to the Prime Minister Netanyahu. They spoke just 10 minutes ago. The President reaffirmed his commitment to uproot the violent anti-Semitism that has swept across university campuses in this country. It is imperative to understand that this form of anti-Semitism is not new. It's as old as the Jewish people are. But this form of anti-Semitism takes on a new form. The person who shot these two young people dead last night screamed, "Free, free Palestine." This is done in the name of a political agenda to eradicate the State of Israel. The State of Israel is now fighting a war on 7 fronts. This is the 8th front. The war to demonize, delegitimize, to eradicate the right of the State of Israel to exist. These were two young, beautiful people, Yaron and Sarah, planned to be engaged next week in Jerusalem. Yaron bought an engagement ring this week. He was taking his soon-to-be bride to meet his parents, who live just outside of Jerusalem. Their murder will not be in vain.
Last night in Washington, something horrific happened. A brutal terrorist shot in cold blood a young, beautiful couple, Yaron Leszczynski and Sarah Milgram. Yaron had just bought an engagement ring for Sarah. He was planning to give it to her in Jerusalem next week. They were planning to start a new and happy life together. Well, that tragically did not happen. Yaron and Sarah weren't the victims of a random crime. The terrorist who cruelly gunned them down did so for one reason and one reason alone. He wanted to kill Jews. And as he was taken away, he chanted, "Free Palestine." This is exactly the same chant we heard on October 7th. On that day, thousands of terrorists stormed into Israel from Gaza. They beheaded men, they raped women, they burned babies alive, they butchered 1,200 innocent people and took 251 innocent people hostage to the dungeons of Gaza. A short time afterwards, Chancellor Scholz of Germany visited Israel. And after he saw the horrors, he said to me, "These Hamas terrorists are exactly like the Nazis." He was right. And if they could get away with it, these Hamas terrorists would have slaughtered every last Jew on earth. For these neo-Nazis, Free Palestine is just today's version of Heil Hitler. They don't want a Palestinian state. They want to destroy the Jewish state. They want to annihilate the Jewish people who've been in the land of Israel for 3,500 years. I could never understand how this simple truth evades the leaders of France, Britain, Canada, and others. They're now proposing to establish a Palestinian state and reward these murderers with the ultimate prize. Well, for 18 years, we had a de facto Palestinian state. It's called Gaza. And what did we get? Peace? No. We got the most savage slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. You won't be surprised to learn that Hamas thanked President Macron and Prime Ministers Starmer and Carney for demanding that Israel end its war in Gaza immediately. Hamas was right to thank them, because by issuing their demand, replete with a threat of sanctions against Israel, not Hamas, These three leaders effectively said they want Hamas to remain in power. They want Israel to stand down and accept that Hamas's army of mass murderers will survive, rebuild, and repeat the October 7th massacre again and again and again, because that's what Hamas is vowed to do. I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney, and Prime Minister Starmer, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers, and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice. You're on the wrong side of humanity. And you're on the wrong side of history. Now, these leaders may think that they're advancing peace. They're not. They're emboldening Hamas to continue fighting forever. And they give them hope to establish a second Palestinian state, from which Hamas will again seek to destroy the Jewish state. And mind you, it's not going to be a state free of Hamas. When you establish a Palestinian state, we've seen it. The radicals take over. Iran sends them in and they take over. So don't give us this talk. It'll be a peaceful Palestinian state. It won't be. But the hypocrisy doesn't stop there. These and other leaders have bought into Hamas's propaganda that says Israel is starving Palestinian children. And not only is Hamas putting out this lie, a few days ago, a top UN official said that 14,000 Palestinian babies would die in 48 hours. You see, many international institutions are complicit in spreading this lie. The press repeats it, the mob believed it, and a young couple is then brutally gunned down in Washington. So here are the facts. Since October 7th, Israel has sent 92,000 aid trucks into Gaza. That's right, 92,000 aid trucks. That includes 1.8 million tons of aid. 1.8 million tons of aid. More than enough food to feed everyone in Gaza. Yet as we had let the aid come in, Hamas stole it. They took a huge chunk for themselves. The rest they sold at exorbitant prices to the Palestinian population. And then they used the money they stole to recruit new terrorists to continue their war against Israel. Our goal from the start was to get food to Palestinian civilians, not to Palestinian terrorists. So we consulted with our American allies. What do we do to prevent Hamas from looting the aid? Well, together we devised a mechanism to achieve this goal. American companies will distribute the food directly to Palestinian families. They'll do so in safe zones secured by our military. And this will allow us to complete our goal of destroying Hamas while enabling aid to reach the civilian population. We'll complete the construction of the first distribution zones in the coming days. Ultimately, we intend to have large safe zones in the south of Gaza, and the Palestinian population will move there for their own safety while we conduct combat in other zones and receive humanitarian aid there without Hamas interference. In the meantime, we authorized letting trucks enter Gaza to provide for immediate needs. Yesterday, I think more than 100 trucks went in. More will come in today. I tell you this, no army in the world has ever gone to such lengths to provide aid to the civilian population in the midst of intense combat. And Hamas, of course, opposes this. It shoots Palestinian civilians who want to leave for safe zones, and it shoots Palestinian civilians who want to prevent Hamas terrorists from looting the aid trucks intended for them. As for the hostages, we'll do every effort to secure them. I'm ready for a temporary ceasefire to get more out, but we demand, and you should demand, that all of our hostages be released, and released immediately. And so should every civilized country demand this. We're in an intense seven-front war that was launched against us by Iran and its proxies. Sometimes in war, accidents happen. One such incident happened the other day in Jenin, and thankfully no one was hurt. Our military has expressed its regret over the event because we don't target civilians or diplomats. We target terrorists. Exactly the opposite of Hamas. They target civilians, ours, and they hide behind civilians, theirs. They use them as human shields. That's a double war crime. But I don't hear that coming from any one of those countries that criticize Israel. For those who say that Israel stands alone, I say we're not alone. Justice stands with us. The truth stands with us. History stands with us. And so do countless people around the world who can tell the difference between right and wrong between good and evil. I want to thank all of them. And I especially want to thank President Trump and the American people for their forthright stand with Israel and with the Jewish people. Together we stand, together we'll triumph, and we'll see the victory of civilization over barbarism. I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney, and Prime Minister Starmer, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers, and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice. You're on the wrong side of humanity. And you're on the wrong side of history. Now, these leaders may think that they're advancing peace. They're not. They're emboldening Hamas to continue fighting forever. And they give them hope to establish a second Palestinian state.
Frankly, for him to say what he said is absolutely outrageous. To blame Prime Minister Starmer, President Macron, and Prime Minister Carney, these three who are absolutely wanting peace. But then you take the other side of the coin, and Yair Golan has said what Netanyahu and his government are doing, they, because of what is going on in Gaza, are unfortunately, they are the catalyst for what happened and what is going on.
Ever since October the 7th and the massacre by Hamas, in which your own cousin was caught up in, she was a hostage, released recently, Emily Damari. But ever since then, the Israeli government has been very clear that criticism of its policies, criticism of it, is tantamount to anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism. And do you think it is possible to criticize the government of Israel without being anti-Semitic?
Of course one can be critical of a government. Of course one can be critical of Israel. Israelis are critical of their government. Israelis are critical of things that are going on in Israel. Does that make someone who's critical of something that's going on in Israel an anti-Semite? Absolutely not. If you're critical of this government in this country, does that mean you're anti-British or you're against the country? No, it means you're critical of a stand the government is taking.
I'm an equal opportunity condemner of anti-Semitism.
You're alluding to Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, none of them are any good on the right. On the left, I don't like any of these anti-Semites, and I'm not shy about it. But the government, the United States government or the government of France or the government of any other country has the power to rein in anti-Semitism in a much more effective way. And you know, people say, well, you know, the governments are not in the business of changing the way people think. That's true, but, you know, to my thinking, most people who are, you know, anti-Semites, most of these people running around, we're not going to win their hearts and minds because they don't have hearts and they don't have minds. So, you know, how are we going to, there's no reason to think we're ever going to convince them, but we can deport them, we can put them in jail, we can make their lives miserable, we can cut off their funding, and that's what the Trump administration is doing for the first time.
When I said Hamas has offered to give all the hostages back, all of them, in fact, demilitarized. He didn't want to hear it. He just refused. And this is how it works here in Germany and in America. The same thing. There's this closed door that there's nothing that can go in. It's completely shut down. They really don't know anymore. I showed him the New York. I said, "Do you read the New York Times?" He said, "Yes, I read the New York Times." He didn't know about this. He didn't know about this. 15 paramedics, not just assassinated in the head, not just assassinated. When they confronted the IDF said exactly what that SA man said. Hamas. Then, do you know what happened? They unburied the people, the 15 men. And in one of them, who I have the picture somewhere I could show you, I think it's this guy, I think it's him. In his pocket was a phone. He had taken a video of his own death, praying to God for forgiveness for helping his people, for God knows how many months of blood and arms and legs and livers and brains. Unbelievable. And these people were assassinated, and he found the phone And they showed it to the IDF and Israel. And you know what they said? I guess we made a mistake. I guess we made a mistake. Why did you bury the ambulances? Bury with bulldozers. Bulldozers. And I was going to tell the SPD man, but he didn't want to hear it. They don't want to hear story after story. And even I asked him, what about October 1st? Why don't you want to hear about October 1st? He didn't want to hear about it. He didn't want to hear that the children were starving already on October 1st. That Amnesty International and Save the Children in 2020 had said Gaza is uninhabitable. And then he said, of course, it's uninhabitable because Hamas. I mean, you can't. How do we get through these people? I just want to tell you that yesterday, there are 4 witnesses to this massacre. One of them was 12 years old. They assassinated him. He didn't want to hear this. He didn't want to hear it.
President Trump is saddened and outraged over the brutal murder of 2 Israeli embassy staff here in Washington, D.C. last night. Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram were a beautiful young couple. In fact, we learned that Yaron was planning to propose to Sarah next week in Jerusalem. Yaron's father, Daniel, spoke about the young couple's devotion for one another this morning. He said, "They were in love, one for the other. The embassy told us they were like a star couple at the embassy. I never expected something like this. He had his whole life before him." These words, especially every parent knows, are heart-wrenching. The evil of anti-Semitism must be eradicated from our society. I spoke to the Attorney General this morning. The Department of Justice will be prosecuting the perpetrator responsible for this to the fullest extent of the law. Hatred has no place in the United States of America under President Donald Trump. Everyone here at the White House is praying for the victims' friends and families during this unimaginable time.
Holy shit. So if you have not already looked, the profile for one of the 2 people who was killed last night in DC, one of the 2 people working for the Israeli genocidal state, his profile's still public and they haven't cleaned it yet. But holy shit, this man was a monster. He not only perpetuated all of the IDF lies, I mean, that's like half of his feed is posting things that are demonstrably false and accusing everyone who questions whether or not children should be murdered en masse of being anti-Semitic. But this motherfucker openly cheered the killing of children, openly celebrated genocide and encouraged ethnic cleansing, who retweeted shit about how they were going to expel all Palestinians from Gaza and how it was their right to land to return to after 2,000 years of their language not even existing and not being there. This guy was a monster. He was a monster. He was a monster representing a foreign adversarial government currently conducting a Holocaust, and they want us to feel sorry for him. Even if I hadn't looked at his profile, I would have said that representatives of a genocidal country should not feel safe in America because we're supposed to stand in opposition to that. And now having seen it, good fucking riddance. This guy was a monster.
So y'all know Guy, right? Who's been basically speaking up for Philistine this whole time. I'm pretty sure y'all saw the video where he basically said he does not condemn the attack after finding out more information. The fact that the guy is a Christian Zionist and the fact that, he's from Germany and he went over to Israel to kill people. And so he said he does not condemn that. That's his American right. Well, the Zionists are pissed the fuck off. He literally has all of Israel in his comment section right now. He invited me to collaborate on this video about his first video where he literally condemned it in his first video. And then he came back later and so they're all lying actually. He didn't say people should be killed. He said, I do not justify it. He said, I don't condemn it. Then they're trying to basically say that he is saying people should go out and target Jews when he literally said in the video that it's a Christian Zionist. That's literally part of the reason he changed his mind on even condemning it to begin with. Like, these people are disgusting, and I think that people need to stand up for him.
Just a few hours ago, 2 Zionist workers at the Israeli embassy at the Capitol here in the United States were murdered, shot by what seems to be a member of the movement. They've already got a suspect in custody. I want to condemn this attack for some obvious reasons and for some reasons that are not so obvious, but it's important because I want to talk also about what may happen to the movement in this country now that this has happened. First off, I don't support the slaughter of civilians. That's not the way to go about it and bring justice. These people deserve to be tried and punished and sentenced to jail for their facilitation of this genocide and Israel's many, many, many crimes. Albeit these 2 did work in the Israeli embassy, which is an arm of the propaganda machine Israel has set up to disseminate propaganda internationally. But that's besides the point. I'm also very afraid that the Trump regime is about to turn around tomorrow and use this attack as a pretext to violently crack down on the movement within this country. The Trump regime has already been deporting every student they can manage to justify deportation so far who support Palestine and criticize Israel. And Trump has publicly said that he wants to go after civilians next, and he's trying to figure out a way to do it. Our Department of Justice has announced that they want to file hate crime indictments and terrorism charges against critics of Israel, especially student protesters and leaders here on college campuses in the United States, to jail them. The FBI is already monitoring every American and immigrant and wannabe immigrant who is criticizing Israel or supporting Palestine on their social media, which they have labeled as counter-terrorism efforts in the name of our national security. Us Americans all know what that means. National security, counterterrorism is just another excuse to invade our privacy and suppress us. The Trump regime also has a playbook that they're going by called Project Esther, developed by the Heritage Foundation, the same people behind Project 2025, whose whole purpose is to suppress and eliminate the pro-Palestinian movement here in the United States and especially on college campuses. What this has been reminding me a lot of is the assassination of German diplomat Ernst von Rath by a Jewish activist, which served as the Nazis' pretext to launch the Kristallnacht, a pogrom against Jewish people that was the transition between discriminatory policy in Nazi Germany to violence and destruction against Jews. The stage here in America has been set in a similar manner with discriminatory policies surrounding free speech, freedom of protest, freedom of press against everyone across the board who supports Palestinian human rights or criticizes Israel, which really amount to the same thing. And I'm afraid this may serve as a pretext for a massive and violent crackdown against us here in this country. Like I said at the beginning of this video, these Zionist embassy workers deserved a trial, not being murdered in the streets. We can guess what motivated this attack, and it probably has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. This probably was not motivated by anti-Semitism, but the fact that Israel has live-streamed a genocide to the world for 2 years and counting, and all the world has done is sit and watch as it's happened. Obviously, and with how dire the situation is right now, people will be driven to the point where they take it into their own hands to do something, anything, to try to stop this. It is interesting that this comes as Israel seems to be entirely losing the narrative. European news outlets are fast abandoning their manufactured consent they've given to Israel for the past 2 years to quickly try to wash their hands of the blood. Piers Morgan even called it a genocide yesterday, which obviously doesn't absolve him of everything he's done. But just to my point, those in America are even labeling Israel's Operation Gideon's Chariots as a final solution for Gaza. So it's quite convenient. Anyways, I encourage you guys to contribute to the fundraiser where we're trying to feed Palestinians in Gaza. We've already raised over $180,000. It's in my bio. Thank you, and free Palestine.
Days ago, I made a video arguing that escalation of resistance against the Israeli state is not something to be afraid of, and that video has been taken down. It was taken down alongside the video Guy Christensen made refusing to play into the narrative of the Israeli state that we should somehow view the deaths of the 2 Israeli embassy workers as exceptional compared to the tens of thousands of Palestinians murdered by the Israeli state. And that's an important question. Why should we do that? Why are the deaths of 2 Israelis somehow more significant than the tens of thousands of Palestinian deaths? Well, it's because they want us to see one group of people as humans and the other group as just mere statistics. And we have to absolutely refuse to play that game. When the Israeli state condemns the actions of its military, when it condemns the use of starvation as a military tactic, when it condemns its forced displacement and ethnic cleansing of Gaza, when it condemns and prosecutes those responsible for the massacre and subsequent cover-up of 15 aid workers, when those committing rape and torture against Palestinian prisoners are brought to justice, when the Israeli state holds up its blood-stained hands and begs for forgiveness, then I will condemn the murders in Washington, D.C. Until then, I absolutely refuse to play into the hysterical Zionist histrionics or propaganda narratives that seek to dehumanize and erase Palestinians. You cannot annihilate an entire people and then play the victim card. And it's vital that we show solidarity with Guy, who is currently facing an onslaught of Zionist vitriol and threats of repression, as well as anyone who is taking a stand against Israeli hypocrisy and violence. No matter how many videos get taken down, no matter how many community violations they issue, no matter how many narcissistic Zionist propaganda hit pieces they write, we are on the side of peace and they are on the side of death and mutilation. When people judge this history in the future, we will be on the right side of it.
Give me a list of embassy employees assassinated by Israel.
Certainly. Here's a concise chronological list of assassinations attributed to Israeli forces, focusing on embassy employees and diplomatic representatives. Pre-state Zionist operations. 1924, Jerusalem. Jacob Israel de Haan, a Dutch-Jewish anti-Zionist activist, was assassinated by the Haganah for his opposition to Zionist policies. 1944, Cairo. Lord Moyne, British Minister of State for the Middle East, was assassinated by Lehi, Stern Gang operatives. 1946, Jerusalem. The King David Hotel, housing British administrative offices, was bombed by the Irgun, resulting in 91 deaths. 1946, Rome. The British embassy was bombed by Lehi, causing significant damage. 1947, Netanyahu. In the Sergeant's Affair, the Irgun kidnapped and executed 2 British sergeants in retaliation for the execution of Irgun members by British authorities. Post-1948 Israeli operations targeting PLO, Fatah, and PFLP figures. 1972, Rome. Wales Whiter, PLO representative and Libyan embassy employee, was shot dead by Mossad agents. 1972, Paris. Mahmoud Hamshari, PLO representative in France, was killed by a bomb concealed in his telephone. 1973, Nicosia. Hussein al-Bashir, Fatah representative in Cyprus, was killed by a bomb in his hotel room. 1973, Paris. Mohammed Boudia, Black September officer, was killed by a car bomb. 1978, East Berlin. Wadi Haddad, PFLP commander, died from poisoned chocolates. 1979, Beirut. Ali Hassan Salameh, PLO leader, was killed by a car bomb. 1982, Paris. Fadl Dani, PLO deputy director, was killed by a car bomb. 1983, Athens. Mamoun Maraish, PLO official, was shot dead. 1986, Athens. Khalid Nazal, DFLP leader, was shot dead. 1986, Athens. Munzer Abu Ghazala, PLO official, was killed by a car bomb. 1988, Tunis. Khalil al-Wazir Abu Jihad, PLO military chief, was assassinated in his home. This list highlights key instances of political assassinations attributed to Israeli forces, focusing on embassy employees and diplomatic representatives.
And before I hear the 2 wrongs don't make a right, the point of this post is not to litigate the morality of this action, but to ask yourself, 1, who set the norm? And 2, why is our media only outraged now? Also, I just want to reiterate that the point of this is not to litigate the morality of this violence, but to highlight the contradiction. And that contradiction is important because it reflects the values that we say we are agreeing to as a society. In this case, if we're saying that we're okay with this contradiction, then we're also saying that we don't believe that the laws and the rules apply equally to everyone. And that, in fact, we accept that some lives are more valuable than others, and therefore more deserving of life and our sympathy. And that's it.
From a purely look at the facts of the case kind of way, it's pretty straightforward and there's not much to say. Guy said free Palestine as he was being escorted out. Is that contained in this video here?
2 Israeli embassy employees based in Washington, D.C. were shot and killed outside the Capitol Jewish Museum late Wednesday night. We are about a block away from where that shooting took place. As you can see, several police cars are blocking off the entire area, and numerous
I can't see
reporters with outlets from around the world are still here reporting live. we are very close, to give you a sense of where we're at, to an FBI field office several blocks away from the U.S. Capitol. Numerous law enforcement agencies from the area responded to the shooting, including Attorney General Pam Bondi, who said during a press conference that the suspect will be, quote,
the shooter was extremely mentally unwell. Their Twitter account was banned for spamming death threats at Will Stancil. At Will Stancil? No way. You're kidding me. That's funny. Oh my God. Who's Will Stancil? One of the more aggressive lib posters on Twitter. Not to say I agree with everything that he says or anything. He is a poster though, capital P poster. You know, it's an honorable role. I had no idea. Well, I assumed this guy was mentally ill because I'll assume like at a default anyone who does like a targeted like killing of civilians is mentally ill. Usually that turns out to be the case. Jesus, that's wild. Here's a vid of the suspect saying free Palestine. Yeah, I saw this is one of the reasons people are calling it a false flag, because he was given like a tee up for this, but given a tee up? Oh, just because it looks like they let him talk, but I think that's just people baiting. You know, that's just people want to see conspiracy everywhere. The idea that some of the more mentally ill pro-Palestinian types would do some, we'll say Israel-style military action themselves and kill civilians, it's not surprising given how the discourse has panned out. We'll add this to, to the bucket of civilians that have been killed as a consequence of Israel's ongoing genocide of the Palestinians. It's unfortunate. You shouldn't kill civilians. Pardon me. I know me and my hot takes. Even if they're working with the Israeli embassy, any arguments you see from the left, and there are people doing this, where they're like, well, maybe they shouldn't have been working with Israel. Come on, stop. They're civilians. But Israel kills civilians. Yes, they do in enormous quantities. I'm not engaging in an equation here. I'm just saying, like, don't pretend this gets anything for anyone, right? If anything, you can all look forward to the revocation of the First Amendment sometime within the next few months, because they're begging for it, right? Like they want so badly. They've been screeching about pro-Hamas terrorism on campus that doesn't exist for over a year now. Obviously, they're looking for any possible excuse. Do we have an example of that? Do we have an example of that insanity here?
The fact of the matter is the Palestinian cause is an evil one.
Yeah, and Congressman, there is a ceasefire deal on the table right now that the White House is hoping both Israel and Hamas will sign on to. Does this shooting change anything when it comes to the course of the war or the negotiations to end it?
Well, I think it speaks to the importance of the only end of the conflict is complete and total surrender by those who support Muslim terror. In World War II, we did not negotiate a surrender with the Nazis. We did not negotiate a surrender with the Japanese. We nuked the Japanese twice.
Wait, we did? That's how you end a war. Yes, we did. It's an unconditional surrender, but that is. Okay, sorry, just basic, lack of historical knowledge.
In order to get unconditional surrender, that needs to be the same here. There is something deeply, deeply wrong with this culture, and it needs to be defeated.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, the total number of civilians who have been killed as a consequence of this conflict has gone up from, well in excess of 50,000, I'll tell you that much, to slightly more than well in excess of 50,000. Not trying to be callous about it. It's just we all know what's coming from this, right? What's the consequence of this going to be? Is it going to be Israeli detente? Is it going to be a ceasefire? Is it going to be an international response to crack down on the genocide? Of course not. It's going to be political persecution of anti-genocide protesters here in the United States. Didn't you know they were set to be engaged, though? The two were killed? No, I didn't know that. That's sad. Were they? Or do you mean the shooter in one of the two that he killed? Because if that just opens up more questions. Yes to the first one. Okay, yeah, that's sad. No to the first one. Yeah, I figured. Anyway, I just don't buy into the Fed bullshit. Obviously, anyone who tries to turn this into the left actually is anti-Semitic or what have you is obviously lying for political gain. And there's a decent chance the person making that argument is a Nazi, right? Given the state of the right at the moment. But also at the same time, anyone who's like, well, actually, this was based, like, this is adventurism, you know, like that's, you know, adventurism, where it's not about like the outcome. You're not trying to fight for any kind of like political change. You're instead just trying to like feel like you're the most basest activist in the world. The ADL called out Hassan by name for this. Well, sure, the ADL is a tool of the military-industrial complex. They are an organization that cynically weaponizes accusations of anti-Semitism in order to further a Zionist agenda. They've done the extent of their bias is, I mean, it was always pretty clear, but like after October 7th, that shit got real wacky.
All you guys that were like, trust the plan, trust Trump, Trump has got our back, he's America first, he's cutting off Netanyahu, he's standing up to Israel. Well, shame on all you guys. You guys fell for it once again. I seriously don't understand how. When are we going to call out the fact that the Jews in America and the Jews in Israel have a symbiotic relationship, whether they want to or not? See, the Jews in America have like this mindset, like, give us an inch, give us an inch. Israel's not really the problem. They're just following America's order. America's really the bad problem. And the Zionists and the Jews in Israel use that to take an entire mile. They use this to get a war in Iran, despite what the Jews in America want, because they obviously don't want one. Don't want one either, for the most part, besides the Ben Shapiro types. But when are we going to stop shilling to this foreign country that clearly does not have our interests at heart? When are we going to stop getting into these stupid wars, destroying our economy, destroying everything that America stands for, including not standing up to genocide for this other country? America's popularity is plummeting. For the first time ever, we are less popular than China. Just think about that. We are less popular than China in the global stage. And when did that start to plummet? 2023. What happened in 2023 that was really significant? Oh, I don't know, October 7th? Do you think that's the case? Do you think that's what it might be? Food for thought. Do you ever think that shilling for a genocidal state and just paying them and funding them and vetoing everything, every proposal that every other country puts forth that'll limit their power is part of the problem? Well, I do. We need to start calling this out. Absolutely. We need to take our country back from these insane AIPAC Zionist Jews.
So yes, there was a German Israeli who worked at the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. Him and his girlfriend died apparently from a shooting in D.C., and the alleged shooter shouted "Free Palestine" while he was being arrested at the scene. Now, obviously, there's going to be conspiracy theories about this, about it being potentially a false flag operation and so forth, since Israel is increasingly losing Western support, and Netanyahu is more desperate than he has ever been to try to save himself from imminent self-destruction. So it's not implausible, but in my opinion, unless and until there's real evidence to the contrary, then the explanation for the shooting should just be accepted. The obvious, apparent explanation should be accepted. It was probably a lone gunman who was probably politically motivated, just like Luigi Mangione. And murder is a very American problem-solving instinct. You know, we're almost 600 days into the demonic genocide in Gaza being perpetrated by Israel and by the United States. That's 50 months of wanton, inhuman carnage playing out on everyone's smartphones, on everyone's social media platforms. It's the most documented, the most visible, the most seen genocide in history. Israeli troops just shot at European diplomats just a day or so ago. There are daily massacres in Gaza. And Netanyahu has declared his explicit desire to completely wipe out the Palestinians in the most unequivocal language that any of us has heard since Hitler. And Donald Trump has signaled his absolute endorsement of ethnic cleansing. And at the same time, he's inventing allegations of ethnic cleansing against South Africa and pretending to be outraged about it. Look, you can't impose this kind of cognitive dissonance, this kind of hypocrisy, this kind of extreme moral and mental sadism on your population and not have some fuses short circuit, especially when your population is already habituated to violence and they're already disproportionately suffering from mental and psychological illnesses across the population. And they're already under enormous tension and pressure regarding their own economic situation. I mean, Americans are barely holding on to their sanity as it is. Your whole society seems like it's a social engineering project to see how much gaslighting, how much emotional abuse, and how much dysfunction human beings can take can be forced to take before they either implode or explode. You've banned people from boycotting. You crack down on protests. You jail and deport protesters. You ignore international law. You dismiss the institutions of international law, while you're basically steering people towards violence. That whole government, the American government, the whole government is acting like those FBI agents who coax and conspire and entrap people in violent plots of their own making. You punish all peaceful means of protest, and then you escalate in the policies that are being protested. And like I said, you do nothing but teach violence to your people all day, every day, in your media, in your music, in your movies, in your games, and in your whole approach to the world. So how do you think that's going to turn out? You know? How are you going to be telling your own people that a genocidal war criminal is a brave man and give him standing ovations and give him billions upon billions of your people's money precisely to continue committing crimes against humanity and not expect them to learn the lesson that lawless violence is legitimate? Especially when you have blatantly showed them that diplomacy doesn't work, economic pressure doesn't work with you, public opinion doesn't work with you, the law doesn't work with you, no legal means, no diplomatic means, no economic means, no popular means, no peaceful means can ever dislodge your fangs from the people of Gaza. Well, I think you want to drive people into desperation, to do desperate acts, precisely so that you can crack down on them even more, so you can double down and act even worse than you've already been acting all this time. And then you're going to grandstand now about how outrageous the shooting was in Washington, D.C., as if you care about human life at all. I mean, never mind about the other 5 people who got shot in Washington, D.C. over just the last week or so. But those were just senseless killings, so that's fine. But this one had symbolism. This one can be exploited for political reasons. So now you care. Now your ideological mourning kicks in. Now the headlines can stretch across the continents. Now the hand-wringing can begin about the dangers of radicalization and hate speech and anti-Semitism and so forth. But let's be honest, this isn't grief, it's an opportunity. It's not outrage, it's leverage. The truth is, the American government doesn't even care about Americans being killed in America unless the narrative is suitable. I mean, how many mass shootings, how many school massacres, how many African Americans are killed by the police and nothing moves the needle? But you let one bullet fly in the direction of your imperial narrative and suddenly the whole machinery comes to life. Suddenly the think tanks are drafting policy briefs. Suddenly Congress is passing resolutions. Suddenly terrorism is back on the menu. And all of it, of course, pointing in one direction, to suppress dissent. So let's be real. This isn't about one shooting. This is about silencing 600 days of justified outrage and about criminalizing sympathy with the victims of genocide. It's about shutting down the voices that refuse to pretend that Israel is the victim. And yes, if it turns out that it was a false flag, and again, I'm not saying that it was, but if it was, it wouldn't be the first time, and it wouldn't be shocking. Because for a regime that is founded on myth and maintained by deception, staging another scene would just be par for the course. Because that's what you do. You know, that's what you do when your survival depends upon manufacturing moral capital from corpses. That's what you do when your legitimacy is completely bankrupt and the only currency you have left is fear. But whether this was orchestrated or not, one thing is clear, it was inevitable. Not because people are inherently violent, no, but because your entire system has systematically blocked every nonviolent path. Because your entire society has been primed, or has been cultivated for cruelty. Because for 600 days, you have demanded that the world watch a live-streamed genocide and then cheer for the murderers. You've made empathy a crime. You've made protest illegal. You've made justice unreachable. And now you want to cry foul when your own citizens finally break under the weight of your lies. No. You don't get to play victim now. You don't get to cry terror when you're the ones who have institutionalized terror financially, militarily, psychologically, economically in every corner of this planet. You don't get to moralize about violence when you send hellfire missiles against tents. You don't get to quote Martin Luther King when you ban students from even saying Free Palestine. You don't get to invoke the sanctity of life when you funded the desecration of life for nearly 2 straight years with no remorse. If you want peace, then stop blocking the path to peace. If you want nonviolence, then stop criminalizing nonviolence. If you want to stop the spread of hate, then stop building your empire on hate. Because what you're seeing now in America, what you just saw in Washington, D.C., whether it was real or orchestrated, that's not the disease, that's the symptom. The disease is you, is your so-called civilization. And until you stop infecting the world with your moral rot, then you can't be shocked when that sickness comes home.